Welcome to the show, the Shark Football Show, every Tuesday and Friday at noon Eastern, 12:03, 3 minutes late today. But we have a great show on tap for you because we've got Coach Kevin Kelley, and I'll do some introductions to him when he's about to come up later. But I think you guys know from the coach who never punts the football, but he also studies the NFL. Like myself, he's consulted with coaches previously in the NFL, and he's got some great takes about the state of the season and some of the things that he's keeping his eye on for you guys. We have a lot of things that we're going to hit. We're going to talk about Aaron Rodgers and why he literally needs to step up and improve his own play and how he can do that. What is he doing differently that he could improve upon? I'm going to go down a list of things for Aaron Rodgers. We've also got Kirk Cousins. Why something about Kirk Cousins cost the Falcons their win against the Seahawks. It was a big-time loss. It wasn't just one play. It was a game plan that Kirk Cousins failed to implement properly, and that coaching staff in general, because they're acquiescing a little bit to Kirk Cousins, didn't capitalize on something with the Seattle Seahawks, and how the Buffalo Bills might be in that same boat this upcoming week when they go and take on the Atlanta Falcons, and why they better capitalize on that if they hope to go into Seattle and walk away with a victory. We're also going to hit on the Jordan rules for Patrick Mahomes. You guys remember that in February? Antonio Pierce on a podcast talking about how he's got the recipe to defeat Patrick Mahomes, and they're going to play him using the Jordan rules. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit as well. We've also got, of course, we've got to discuss Jerod Mayo's comments and Bill Belichick's response. We're going to be hitting on that here momentarily. And of course, as you guys love, the strength of schedule discussion. Thank you, Brian. Compliments on the shirt. Best show on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Yes, Big Fire Horticulture. Please, everybody, we are streaming live on X and on YouTube. And if you want to contribute to the comments, please go over to YouTube. You can get your comments in. We'll pop them on throughout the show. I'll go ahead and read and respond to them. We'll get some of your questions as well. So when you're over on YouTube, make sure that you like the show. Give this episode a big thumbs up. Make sure that you're subscribing to the show as well. With that being said, we've got a packed show because we are going to be getting into a lot of different things with Coach Kevin Kelley. I'm really looking forward to that segment. So we have a special guest already booked for next week as well, NFL Insider, who's breaking some really good information. She has not yet been on the show. I've already talked to her. She's going to be coming on the show next week. So we're booking some nice guests for you guys moving through the weeks, and I'm excited about that. But with that said, let's start talking a little bit about the Aaron Rodgers, the way that he's playing, and the way that they need to improve. Let's go ahead and get to that topic, Matt. Looking back to the Jets' loss to the Steelers, I was struck by Aaron Rodgers' performance. After all, he has an elite wide receiver one already in Garrett Wilson. He added a new wide receiver one in the form of his good friend and one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, Davante Adams. You would think that he would take advantage of that, but only 27.5% of Aaron Rodgers' pass attempts went beyond the sticks. Aaron Rodgers' air yards per attempt was only 5.2. That ranked dead last among quarterbacks last week, number 32. So I'm thinking this is probably because he was under pressure a lot, right? He had to dump it off short. No. Actually, he was pressured at the number 2 lowest rate of any quarterback in the NFL last week, only 20%. And still, 36% of his pass attempts were thrown at or behind the line of scrimmage. Only Andy Dalton was worse. The difference, though, is that Andy Dalton was pressured on an insane 56% of his dropbacks, the third highest rate in the NFL. Rodgers, again, was pressured at the 4th lowest rate. So then I zoomed out. On the season, Aaron Rodgers has been pressured on just 24% of his dropbacks. That is the 4th lowest rate in the NFL. Naturally, to receive that little amount of pressure, you probably are throwing it relatively quickly or you're very mobile. Rodgers, of course, is not mobile. He's throwing it very quickly. Only 2.42 seconds time to throw. That is the fastest of any quarterback in the NFL. And he's throwing 31% of his passes at or behind the line of scrimmage. That's the number 2 most. So let's pause before we keep going. He's throwing it fast, he's throwing it short, and he's doing that voluntarily because he's not being pressured. He's not being pressured on over 75% of his passes. And yet, look at this kicker. Given those factors, do you think his completion rate should be high? I mean, when you're not pressured and you're throwing it really short, I would think that his completion rate should be extremely high. Probably an elite completion rate. Short, not under pressure. But guess what? Aaron Rodgers this season ranks number 31 in completion rate, completing just 61.7% of his passes, well below the NFL average of 66%. How does this look graphically? Well, Matt, why don't you pull up that first graphic? Okay, what you can see here is you've got Aaron Rodgers, bottom left quadrant. You've got the completion percentage moving from left to right on the x-axis. The better quarterbacks at completing passes are over to the right. The worst quarterbacks are over to the left. Aaron Rodgers, way over there on the left. And yet his air yards per attempt, which is on the y-axis, is one of the lowest in the NFL. He's way down by himself in this bottom left-hand quadrant, worse than all of the scrubby quarterbacks around the league in terms of completion rate versus air yards per attempt. So now bring up the next graphic. Here you can see the completion rate is still the x-axis. I kept that the same. But on the y-axis now, you see air yards per attempt, percentage of passes that are thrown at or behind the line of scrimmage. High means that he's throwing the ball a lot and very frequently at or behind the line of scrimmage. And once again, he stands out by himself, throwing the ball a ton at or behind the line of scrimmage on over 30% of his pass attempts, but one of the worst completion percentages in the NFL. This is not normal. No quarterback should be in this category. This is absurdly bad. Let's go to the next one, Matt. And lastly, we've got accuracy rate versus target depth. This time, accuracy rate is along the x-axis. Air yards per attempt that we referenced previously is along the y-axis. And so, once again, Aaron Rodgers, poor accuracy despite a very low air yards per attempt. Now, this isn't adjusted for CPOE, so you can get rid of this one now, Matt, and let's keep rolling here. Aaron Rodgers ranks number 31 out of 32 qualifying quarterbacks in CPOE, completion percentage over expectation. He's been absolutely terrible. Only Anthony Richardson has been worse. And if you studied Anthony Richardson heading into the season and then you watched Anthony Richardson play so far this season, you would not be shocked at all that he is number 32, and he's number 32 by a long way. But the only quarterback that is that is worse than Aaron Rodgers is Anthony Richardson, and that's saying something. I don't think the problem is that Aaron Rodgers needs a new receiver. That's not the problem. The problem is he needs confidence in his offensive line to push the football down the field. He needs confidence in his own health to be willing to take these hits and hang into the pocket a little bit longer. He needs to be getting the ball beyond the line of scrimmage. He needs to be pushing the ball down the field. If you're going to miss, you might as well miss when the pass has a chance to gain some solid production as opposed to being extremely inaccurate throwing the football at or behind the line of scrimmage. Now, I do think Aaron Rodgers will improve. This really has nowhere to go but up. But it's just glaringly bad how frequently he's throwing the ball short, how low his average depth of target is, how quickly he wants to throw the ball so he's not getting pressured, and yet how inaccurate all of these passes are. None of it makes sense. These things shouldn't go together in concert. If you're going to be throwing it short and quick, you should be pretty accurate and have a high completion rate, but he does not. He has one of the worst in the NFL. I do believe that there's going to be some regression here. Aaron Rodgers should get a little bit more comfortable with this offense, with his receiving core, but we're not going to see the Jets take that step. You know, they keep losing games and they keep trying to bring this guy in, fire this coach, add now Hassan Reddick. They're making moves after every single loss. What they need to do is just get Aaron Rodgers to feel comfortable in that pocket and just to trust that I might take some hits, but I need to play quarterback. I need to push the ball down the field a little bit more. I'm okay if I throw the ball a little bit under pressure. I can't just be dumping the ball off every time I think that pressure might be coming to avoid any of that pressure. I think they'll get better, but they need some work here. All right, Matt, next topic. All right, Marcus says it's getting late early in the Jets season, still pulling for Rodgers to start cooking and a new offensive play caller. Yeah, it is absolutely getting late. And I think that they're going to improve. There's really nowhere else you could go. You see where Aaron Rodgers sits on some of these graphics. There's really nowhere else that you can go but up. I think that they will get better here. And I think that that will regress positively. I'm not so sure about what's going on in Atlanta because the book is kind of out, just like the book is out a little bit on the types of stunts and pass rushes that are giving that Houston Texans offensive line some problems, and teams are just using them more and more frequently, and it's causing problems for CJ Stroud. Well, teams understand a little bit about the way that the Atlanta Falcons offense is performing and what Kirk Cousins likes and dislikes, what he's capable of doing and what he's not capable of doing. And this actually cost them a win. So I want to throw up the next graphic. Hold on a second here. Matt, why don't you go full screen on this next graphic? Let's bring this in real big. Go full screen, please. Okay. I want you guys to check out what we're looking at here. And keep in mind, the Atlanta Falcons just played the Seattle Seahawks. And so if you're looking at this graphic, what you'll notice is on the x-axis, you're going to see defensive efficiency when teams use play action against you. And on the y-axis, you're going to see defensive efficiency when teams do not use play action against you. And what this means is where the Atlanta Falcons are sitting, you will see that the Seattle Seahawks defense is sitting. You will see that the Seattle Seahawks are one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL when teams use play action against them. One of the worst. They're 5th worst in the NFL, right? Like 28th, with the Rams being dead last. But when you look at the y-axis, pass efficiency without play action, you could see that they actually are the 5th best team in the NFL, the 5th best pass defense in the NFL. What it means to be in this top left quadrant is that you need to have efficiency. You need to use play action against these pass defenses. They're extremely sensitive. I use the terminology sensitive to this type of play action. It means they have big splits with and without play action. And when I was working with a team in particular, this was a big focus for me when I would help devise some of their game plans, was this is what we need to capitalize on. Any team that's in this quadrant, we really need to jack up our play action rate, because this is going to be a clear deficiency and a way to attack this opponent. And so when you're going up against the Seattle Seahawks or the San Francisco 49ers or the LA Rams especially, you have to dial up a lot more play action than you normally do. So I know the Falcons aren't using play action because it seems Kirk Cousins still isn't quite healthy. And I learned long ago to toss out that assumption of rational coaching. So, the Falcons, they use play action. They're not going to probably use it that much. If they're not using it regularly, they may not use it much in this game. So sure enough, the Atlanta Falcons used play action on only 4 dropbacks last week, the lowest rate of any team in the NFL, despite the Seahawks sitting here in that top left quadrant. But look at what the Falcons did with play action on early downs. Matt, why don't you pop that next one up? With play action, when Kirk Cousins used play action on early downs, he averaged positive 0.41 EPA, 75% success, and 7 yards per attempt. Without play action, negative 0.39 EPA, 46% success, and 5.7 yards per attempt. Now, you see that I'm only focusing on early downs. I always get rid of third downs when I'm looking at something like this, because it's not fair to compare play action splits with third down, because you're almost never going to use play action on third down. You just don't do it. You use play action on early downs the vast majority. So I'm not going to throw in Kirk Cousins' poor performance on third down and make those third downs weigh into dragging down that minus 0.39 even further. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt here, just looking at early downs. And so, Matt, you could bring it back to me. This is an issue for the Atlanta Falcons. Why did they not see that they should be using a lot more play action? I mean, they used it 4 times. They had a lot of success when they used it. Are they not studying their opponent and making a tweak to the game plan. If they can use it 4 times and they have success, they could use it 10 times. And that's what they should have obviously done, and they would have had a lot more success. Because they were not using play action when they're passing the football, think about that Seattle Seahawks defense. What was the biggest issue with that Seattle Seahawks defense entering the game? They were decimated in the secondary. And yet the and they were getting healthier on that defensive line. They were getting guys back on that defensive line, but they were losing guys in the secondary. And yet they are using run plays on early downs and no play action, and they're just dropping back standard to pass the football, making it much more predictable and helping out that secondary, which is one of the most sensitive defenses to play action in the NFL. So now, Matt, why don't you pop up this final graphic? Look at where the Buffalo Bills sit here on early down play action usage. So you see the Atlanta Falcons, early down play action usage. Once again, I'm focusing on early downs. The Atlanta Falcons use it the least of any team. The assumption of rational coaching, we got to throw that out the window. We would not expect them to use more, though they should have. So let's look at the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills use play action at the 3rd lowest rate of any team in the NFL. And yet on that y-axis, that's EPA per attempt with play action. In other words, they are one of the best teams in the NFL when they do decide to use play action, but they still are using it at the 3rd lowest rate. For this game in particular, the Buffalo Bills absolutely must go ahead and jack up their play action usage rate a ton. They've got to bring it back up well above that 12.5% that they've got on the season. They've got to jack that up. You can bring it back to me, Matt. And bring it way higher than what they currently are using play action at. If they're going to have success against the Seattle Seahawks defense, which is the 5th best in the NFL when teams don't use play action against them, the Bills cannot afford to use play action at the 3rd lowest rate, especially considering how good the Buffalo Bills are when using play action. They absolutely positively must jack up that play action usage rate. Hopefully they do that this weekend when they go on the road into Seattle. That game right now, I'm looking at my odds screen. Where are we at here? The Buffalo Bills are laying 3 points on the road. It opened at 3. It is still at 3. We still have a lot to determine with the health of that Seahawks secondary. Will they get any of those guys back? But what we do know is that they are getting healthier along that defensive line. They better jack up that play action rate. And we'll see if their offensive coordinator is paying attention to the numbers and the data and the Seahawks defensive analytics, and if they jack that usage rate up or not. But one thing's for certain, they're going to get called out on this show next Tuesday at noon Eastern if they do not use enough play action and end up losing that game, just like Kirk Cousins and that Atlanta Falcons team. No excuse for that. All right. Next up, I'm extremely excited. Let's see. Bet that over. IB the Gambler, Incarcerated Bob. There you go. Bet that over. He likes the over 46.5 in the Seahawks game. The total right now, so he must have gotten 46.5. It opened at 48, has been bet a little bit lower, is up to 47 right now. Watch out. There could be a little bit of weather out there. We got to see what that weather forecast is showing. But if the Bills jack up that play action rate, absolutely they're going to have some opportunities to have some success against that Seahawks secondary and help Incarcerated Bob there on the over. So let's see what we've got there. This next guest, though, I'm extremely excited to welcome him in. He wrote for us here at Sharp Football for a little while. He's a pretty prestigious guest in the football community. If you guys know him a little bit, he's a multi-time, I think 9-time, if I'm not mistaken, state champion high school football coach. He briefly did a stint at the college level. He also has been a consultant at the NFL level. And, you know, my introduction probably won't do Coach Kevin Kelley enough justice. So maybe you guys should hear from probably the greatest football coach of all time, Bill Belichick, what he has to say about Coach Kevin Kelley before we bring him on.
Coach Kelley's one of the, probably the top high school coach in the country, and, certainly been, one of the great coaches in Arkansas high school football history. Followed him. He's a little unconventional, but, he's had great success, and he's had a lot of players come through there. We've had a couple other ones here, but, Henry's, probably one of the best ones, and, I have great respect for, Coach Kelley and the program he runs, and, some of the creative things that he does. And then, watching him and following Hunter there, just saw him in Coach Kelley's system, and they've had tremendous production there and success.
Thank you.
All right, so without further ado, let's welcome in Coach Kevin Kelley. Coach, how are you doing today?
Fantastic. I mean, I'm on the Warren Sharp football show. How good could it get?
I was pretty happy to hear when I invited you on. You said that you actually watch the show when you get a chance to. So I'm happy to hear that you are also a viewer, and we're certainly really appreciative of you lending some time with us here to talk about the NFL season as it stands right now. Why don't you give people like a couple minutes of yourself on your background?
I've been super blessed in the world of football. Started coaching high school football in Texas. Moved up at Arkansas, took over as an OC, then took over as a head coach. I've always been a little bit different thinker, a little bit like Warren here in the world, and I got lucky. I started thinking differently before it was a thing in football. Before analytics were there, I was looking at numbers and trying to do things, and because I was the only one at any level of football, I got a break and got to do a bunch of stuff with ESPN, HBO, and go speak at the Sloan Sports Analytics Conference 2 different times. And all that did was propel me to think about it even more in a world of numbers rather than gut decisions like a lot of football guys. So as I moved up, I started implementing those and won a bunch of state championships in football. Bounced around, went and coached college for a year, took over the smallest program in Division I, and did really good on offense. Didn't have a good record that year. Ended up resigning and taking a job and doing some work for Coach Belichick with the Patriots. And then came back home to watch my daughter graduate high school and got back into high school football. And that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, there you go. And obviously we got Hunter Henry up there with Coach Belichick, and it probably like kind of one of the most threatening receivers. I always appreciated what Hunter Henry was capable of doing. I'm guessing you had some involvement in bringing him up there. Talk a little bit about Hunter Henry there.
Hunter in high school, when he was in ninth grade, coming up into senior high as a varsity starter, he was going to start wherever he played as a sophomore. And that's not a usual thing in varsity football and big time football. But he was a left tackle because his dad was an all Southwest Conference player before Arkansas went to the SEC. And I saw him play basketball, and I'm like, that gets good in open space. He's got great hands. So I told his dad I was moving him to tight end. And we didn't really have a tight end, which really benefited him later on because he got to work in open space all the time and catch balls down the field in a spread offense, and had 2,000-yard seasons, another one almost 1,000, and probably had 40 touchdowns in his receiving career in high school. And that prepared him for college because they thought they could teach a big kid like him to put his hand on the ground and be physical. But you don't get as good a chance at a young age to catch literally hundreds of footballs every day. And I think that he's shown that he's one of the best guys in space for a tight end in the NFL. And I think he's shown he's got the best hands of any tight end in the NFL when they throw it to him. Of course, now he's in a situation where, they're rebuilding their offense. He's not getting as many opportunities. Had a good game Sunday, but that's where Hunter is. And he'll always be a hard worker that's not afraid to catch the ball over the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. I've enjoyed watching him play. The analytics certainly show when you're getting him the football, good things end up happening. You sent me some ideas of things that you would like to discuss on the show. I always want to go to kind of like the strengths of my guests in terms of takes that they have and ideas they have. And actually, I liked a lot of what you were sending over, Coach. So we're going to just run down the list of things that you had. And the first thing on that list is something that a lot of people might find pretty shocking, especially considering their record right now. But you do not believe that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to three-peat this year, despite the fact that they are the only undefeated team remaining, sitting at 6-0. Talk to us a little bit about why you have that belief that the Kansas City Chiefs are not going to be able to get it done in 2024.
Well, a little bit of it is your fault, Warren, because last year, if you'll remember, when Pittsburgh was winning games, but they were getting outgained yardage-wise, and you showed that was probably unsustainable because it just had not been done in the NFL, and things have not been done. It's hard to be the first one to foray into that area, but it didn't even make sense to be able to win those games and continue to be out yardage. If you look at what Kansas City's doing, I think they're doing things that point to losing on the football field as far as quarterback-centered team, especially like Kansas City is, but they continue to win. And people would say, well, their defense is that good. I've only seen one defense that good, and that was the Trent Dilfer-led Baltimore Ravens back in the day. And other than that, but looking at Mahomes right now, and obviously Patrick Mahomes is what he is, but we can see their offense has been broken down with Pacheco out and losing Rashee Rice and the receivers they lost last year. And right now he's 30th among quarterbacks that are qualified in completions over expected. And that's a big thing that I look at. He is just below Deshaun Watson and Daniel Jones. Now, part of that reason is because of what they have a receiver, but that's not going to change a whole lot. And I'm sure as much as they get Xavier Worthy involved, he's still a rookie that's got a lot to learn and makes a lot of mistakes on the field that we don't see. But to be 30th among completion over expected is not a Mahomes type thing. And that's where he is after a pretty good sample size. His touchdown to interception ratio, everybody talks about it being 6 to 8. That is not sustainable to be able to continue to win games. Now, it might be in the division that they're in, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit in another second. He has the lowest completed air yards of anyone active. Lowest completed air yards. Now, if you go back to when Alex Smith played for Kansas City, that's the last time Andy Reid's team was the lowest. And they were just simply afraid to throw the ball down the field, whether it was protection or whether it was receivers or whether it was they couldn't get open or whatever. And again, that's unsustainable to continue to winning, especially to win a Super Bowl. They're good enough with their defense and Mahomes to make it the first round of the playoffs, second round maybe, winning those games. But I just think it's unsustainable. Average yards to first down, he's second behind Mason Rudolph in throwing it short of the first down marker. Now, they're really good run after the catch on their routes are all motion routes instead of stationary routes, but eventually that's going to catch up with you. And I'm just waiting for this to all revert to the mean. And the last couple things is as a coach, I look at it and I go, your schedule gets you ready for the playoffs in that Super Bowl run. Last year in the regular season down the stretch, they played at the beginning of the year, they played the Lions and they played the Vikings, who were good last year, the Jets when they were good, the Packers, and we saw what they did to the Cowboys in the playoffs, the Bills, everybody knows that, the Bengals, who always end up giving the Kansas City a tough game, and the Eagles, who were still good last year before they went on their skid. This year, the only two really good teams they've got left on their schedule, and you can look at division and go, well, Denver maybe. I don't consider Denver a great team right now. Offensively, they're just not there. But Pittsburgh and Buffalo have all they've got on that schedule. So they're going to run through and they're going to have a good record. But they don't have teams on that schedule that are going to get them ready when they've got to go up against Murderers Row when they get to the playoffs this year.
Yeah, and I'm looking right now at their schedule of offensive efficiency, and this is what, you and I think about the game more so from an offensive perspective, I think, because we both understand that offense contributes far more to winning games and producing outcomes than does defense. And so if you could be good offensively, that's going to carry more weight than if you're good defensively. What is extra impressive, though, about what I've seen from the Kansas City Chiefs team so far this year, when I look at their defense and who they've gone up against, they have played the number one toughest schedule of opposing offenses year to date. They've already played the Baltimore Ravens. They've already played the Cincinnati Bengals. They've played the San Francisco 49ers. They've played the Atlanta Falcons. They played the New Orleans Saints. Now, obviously, the Saints right now are not a solid offense. And they played the LA Chargers, who obviously are not good. They're about to go up against another offense that's not good in the Las Vegas Raiders. The rest of the teams that they are going to play offensively down the stretch of this year, you mentioned that they're only going up against the Buffalo Bills, and unfortunately Tampa lost Mike Evans, who's probably got a multi-week hamstring injury. We don't know yet, and Chris Godwin for the rest of the season, which was a gruesome, unfortunate injury there at the end of the game last night. They're not going to be playing the best offense that they've got besides the Bills. And if we downgrade Tampa a little bit, which I think we obviously have to when they lose their top two wide receivers, is probably the Houston Texans. And that's a game where CJ Stroud has shown massive splits, home versus road. His ability to perform and that offense's ability, they probably have Nico Collins back. I think that's the Christmas game, if I'm not mistaken, or the weekend right before Christmas. But they're going to be going up against, I think it might be the Saturday before Christmas. Maybe Nico's back. Otherwise, they've got the Carolina Panthers offense, the Denver Broncos offense, the Raiders offense again, 2 times left. The Chargers offense, again, not great. The Browns offense, The Steelers offense, which is going to be a little better with Russ, but you got some takes on that momentarily. And of course, the Broncos again. This defense could carry them, like you said, but once they get there and they're going to be going up against teams that are balanced with good defenses and good offenses, it could get a lot more interesting.
Yeah, if they were playing at Houston, I would have considered Houston there too. But like you talked about with the splits of CJ Stroud, it's tough to put them in the good offensive category on the road.
Yeah, 100% agree. So that's an interesting take. You've got another one here, Coach. You want to talk about a team that pulled the wrong quarterback. So which team pulled the quarterback? Everybody got upset about the one that we saw, but which team should have been pulling the quarterback?
Yeah, everybody was upset about the Russell Wilson, starting over Justin Fields. It should have been Flacco over Anthony Richardson. I mean, putting Anthony Richardson back in the game, and it sounded like a good thing, but it's not. But if you look, you look at Anthony Richardson, he throws the ball the longest yardage past the first down markers. Now, if you want to get into the weeds a little bit, but he's got the lowest completion percentage in the league at 48.5%. Okay. And that means if you're inaccurate, the further you throw the ball, the more you're going to miss anyway. And he's a guy that doesn't need to be throwing it past the sticks. He's got the worst completions percentage over expected in the league. He is negative 11.4. That means 11% of the time when your average of a quarterback would complete the pass, he misses. They don't complete it for some, and he's got good receivers at times. So he's worse than Spencer Rattler, Tyler Huntley, and Bryce Young. He is dead last, and he's not. Here's the real kicker of that. He's not, you would think, well, maybe he's trying to throw into tight windows. He's not even in the top 10 in tight windows throws. He's got some mechanic problems. He's got some footwork he needs to work on to be able to do that better. And then flip it over and you look and you go, well, he's 48.5% overall on completion, which is atrocious in the NFL. Joe Flacco is almost 66% completion percentage, and Joe Flacco is 2.1% over expected, which is ninth in the league. And so he completes them more than average when anybody else wouldn't. So, I mean, that puts him at 14% better. Now, how does this really kill a team? What that means is when there's third down and it's going to be punt or make a first down, over 10% of the time when a guy's open and the ball should be complete, Anthony Richardson misses them. That changes games if you think about you only get a limited 10 to 12 possessions in the NFL, real possessions. And you're turning one or two a game over because you can't hit an open receiver on third down. And then lastly is the experience of Flacco of knowing when to take a sack or when to throw the ball away. And he knows what his limitations are. And right now, Anthony Richardson hasn't learned his. I'm still with the old school guy. And, except for extreme situations, guys like Anthony Richardson need to come in, be under somebody and develop. And if you look at the numbers, clearly Joe Flacco, and you look at what he did for Cleveland last year, clearly he's still got the ability to lead a football team. And if you want to go even further, with Joe Flacco in as opposed to Anthony Richardson, which involves play calling and everything else, they average over 40 more yards a game of offense. And he had one really bad game against the Titans, who are really good against play action, which probably deterred those numbers, but he's still 40 yards a game better than Richardson is.
Yeah, Richardson, we were talking about Aaron Rodgers and how he ranks 31st in the NFL in CPOE, and there's only one quarterback who's worse than him, and that's Anthony Richardson, and he's far worse in terms of CPOE, is 2 times worse than what Aaron Rodgers is at number 31. And I got to tell you, Coach, we bet on these games. You do as well. We do some prop betting and whatnot, and before the season started, one of the props that I really was behind was Michael Pittman's reception count under. I want to say it was in the low 80s for the season. And the biggest factor is that Anthony Richardson is like less than 50% completion rate when throwing the football to wide receivers. And so we knew that going in, and we expected that Anthony Richardson was going to be the QB1 for the Indianapolis Colts this year. And we were hoping, based upon the bet, right, that he's going to stay as healthy as possible, as long as possible, play as many games, because we're more likely to win that bet on Michael Pittman not catching as many passes because Anthony Richardson is going to be their quarterback. He obviously struggles to play that position. It becomes difficult. Like, you and I can sit here and say, if the Colts want to have the best chance to win their next game against the Houston Texans, they should be playing Joe Flacco. Somewhat, though, and I guess I'll say it's a somewhat nearsighted opinion. Maybe the coaches, obviously they drafted Anthony Richardson. They need to let Anthony Richardson work through some of these issues, see if he can be better. Are you of the belief that Anthony Richardson is just never going to be an NFL caliber quarterback? Have you, quote unquote, seen enough from him? Or if you had made that investment, when we talk about this other layer adding to the discussion, if you are the GM and you make that investment in Anthony Richardson, you kind of need to play this out a little bit more and live with the fact that you probably aren't going to be making the playoffs this year, but you need to make sure that you are completely out on him before you just pivot to Joe Flacco, because Joe Flacco might win you more games, but he can't be considered like the future of a team, a guy that's going to lead this team to the Super Bowl.
It's a big deal with quarterbacking. I think is the hardest job on the planet. I mean, I think there's a lot of guys that could save your life as a heart surgeon or a brain surgeon, and that's a tough job. But quarterbacking, I've always said it. There's only about 8 or 9 guys walking on the planet right now that can lead your team to a Super Bowl this year, and it's so super hard. The question that the Colts need to be asking is, we want to develop Anthony Richardson. I don't think they're putting him in to see if if he's going to be the long-term guy. I think they're trying to develop him, and they feel the pressure because of the investment. But the real question they need to ask is, does he get better being on the field under duress, making mistakes and learning bad habits, or would he get better by watching a quarterback that knew how to play quarterback, but then when he got in, teaching him to play quarterback first and using his feet second? So make your pre-snap reads, watch your film, learn how to do that. And I think he would become a better quarterback faster if they let him learn under somebody for 1 full year, took all the stress. You're not starting. We're putting it on Flacco. Just learn, just watch, just learn. And I think that was the case. I think that would be the case. I hope they're not using this to determine if he's going to be their future or not, just throwing him in there after he was hurt last year, hurt this year, comes back in. That's a tough spot for him to be in. Now, I did not think Anthony Richardson was worth drafting where they drafted him. No doubt about that. But now that they have him, give the kid a chance to develop by putting him behind somebody and not throwing him to the wolves, because he is mentally not ready for it yet.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And actually, let's pivot to that discussion. I was going to talk about the Steelers a little bit here. We will talk about the Steelers momentarily with Coach Kevin Kelley. Just to reset for those of you guys just joining us, we're going to be going through a lot of other compelling topics. We're going to talk about Russell Wilson and the Pittsburgh Steelers with Coach Kelley. We're going to talk about Lamar Jackson and what he means for the Baltimore Ravens and why Kelley thinks that that's going to make the Baltimore Ravens the favorites over the Kansas City Chiefs to win the Super Bowl, even though that's not necessarily what the betting market shows. We're going to get into some NFL awards talk with Coach Kelley as well. Later on in the show, we're also going to be hitting on some of the comments that Jerod Mayo made with Bill Belichick. Maybe actually we'll bring that up with Coach Kelley since he's got that familiarity there. We'll also talk about the Jordan rules against Patrick Mahomes and some of the things that the Raiders are going to try to pull out this weekend in those games and get into strength of schedule as well. If you're just joining us here, make sure that you guys are following over on YouTube as well. Search Sharp Football Analysis. You can find our show there, live stream it every Tuesday and Friday, noon Eastern. Make sure that you're subscribing to the show over there. Give us a thumbs up and hit that alarm bell so that you get notified anytime that we are going live. We'll get your questions in here. Tyler says that it was 87.5, currently 28. Yeah, the 28 is a little bit of a joke, but he's not far off from where we are headed here with Michael Pittman, as long as Anthony Richardson is the quarterback. We will talk about the rookie quarterbacks here, Tony, with Coach Kelley right now, because I want to ask Coach why he holds the opinion that most rookie quarterbacks should sit for a full season and learn and process. So, Coach, why do you believe that?
But the game is so difficult and so hard. And then when you add the exterior things that come with being an NFL quarterback and all the side stuff that comes with it, and now that I've got a chance to be up there and be in the building and see what that's like on and off for a number of years, then for a consecutive time, it's tough with all the distractions that come along. It's tough being the low guy on the totem pole. Veterans are still giving you a hard time, which is a distraction for you and all this. And then there's the learning of the game in the NFL. They are so much better at disguising coverages, so much better at disguising blitzes than they are even in college. And then, and unless you have a great OC/quarterback coach that can really walk you through it and get you ready for the game, it's tough if you're not going to sit back and watch how somebody else studies it, but also watch from the sideline and see how they do it. Now, At the same time, I will say this. I know that Jayden Daniels, and I was a big proponent of him being the first selection in the draft. And I think the Washington, I would love to know if their GM would have taken him first, if they would have had the first pick instead of the second pick. But I think I'm a big proponent of him being the best. And I think one of the reasons he's able to be successful is he likes to use the VR stuff, the virtual reality stuff.
Yep.
That is a thing that every NFL team has, but rarely is it used. Okay. Quarterbacks just think the on the field stuff and this and that. Maybe when it's time to go, they're ready to go to their house. They've got their own film set up at home. But that VR stuff, I have watched it. I have used it. I have experimented with it myself. I wish I could afford it for my own quarterbacks because when you put that on, you are getting live game reps. You are in a room, you are in the stadium behind your line looking at what you're going to see in the game. It is as close. If you've ever put those on to play a video game or ride an airplane or a ride, it is amazing how your brain is tricked into thinking you are there. And that is exactly what you need as an NFL quarterback are those reps. And furthermore, you get those reps without having to worry about getting hit or killed. So it's as close to game reps as you can get. And Jayden Daniels used that at LSU. He uses it now, and he's one of only a handful of quarterbacks that I've found that uses those things. And the other one maybe being Drake Maye. I think he likes to use them. They've got some problems offensively, but I think those two guys are probably the most qualified rookies to play based on the fact that I believe they're getting as close to extra game reps as you can possibly get. And game reps are absolutely invaluable, as any coach would tell you.
Yeah, so the VR camera, that's one of the things from my perspective. Teams, especially at the professional level, need to be uncovering, like turning over every stone, uncovering every single possible edge that they've got so that they can have a leg up on their opposition. And getting a quarterback who's going to practice virtual reality, like when he's not at the stadium, so that he can go and just sit there and practice it wherever he happens to be, is absolutely invaluable. And if more teams, how many teams do you think are actively using that, Coach?
I think there's single digits. I really think it's less than 5. Now, if you ask them, they all have it. They all have access to it. But coaches don't necessarily make their guys go use it. I would set that as part of his practice. I would set that as part of the meetings with the quarterback coach or the OC. Is I would sit in there with them, watch what they watched, and coach them through that in meetings as well as just watch film. It is fantastic. Now, Jayden Daniels obviously does other things that makes him a great quarterback. And my favorite is that he is a guy that is very much like Lamar. He wants to play in the pocket first and run if he needs to. And I think, Caleb Williams, everybody's talked about him playing out of structure. I mean, they're trying to do a better job with him in there. Jayden Daniels wants to play in structure and then can run and throw accurately without. But I do think a ton of that comes from getting used to it in that VR accessible the moments he gets in there.
Yeah, I just find that to be fascinating. And if you're suggesting that it's less than, in the single digits and maybe 5 or fewer, to me, that's just unacceptable. When you've got a quarterback who's making that amount of money, as valuable as they are to the franchise, just every little small edge could be a benefit, just like coaches understanding the analytics and the data and working to uncover those mismatches, just like we talked about. Probably one of the reasons that the Atlanta Falcons passing game wasn't working quite as well is because they threw the ball with play action only 4 times against the Seattle Seahawks, even though the Seattle Seahawks, one of the most sensitive defenses to utilizing play action. And we'll see if the Buffalo Bills can capitalize on that this week. Moving over to the Pittsburgh Steelers, Coach, you talked a little bit about what you saw from Justin Fields throughout the course of the season to date. And then we saw Russell Wilson get inserted. And it was interesting, some of the comments from, everybody's got an opinion. Everybody's allowed to have an opinion, and Twitter's a great way to express those opinions. So you have all types of people coming out saying that they shouldn't have put Russell Wilson in there, that Justin Fields was the guy. You look at his record and what he was doing, but you have to think along the lines of what Mike Tomlin is thinking. Look beyond just the record, the win-loss as to what the team has done. And if you're trying to get to that next level and raise that ceiling a little bit, you completely agreed with the move to Russell Wilson. Talk to us about what Russell Wilson brings to the Pittsburgh Steelers offense that Justin Fields simply cannot.
Well, and I think the number one, besides the experience and leadership, I mean, guys can rally behind a Russell Wilson because they know what he's done, whether anybody believes that or not. You look at Super Bowl, you look at just a good guy in the locker room. Not that Justin Fields is not, but he hasn't accomplished anything on the field. That's number one, and people don't realize how important that is. The biggest thing that I think he does is Justin Fields. If you look at him, he's got one level ball. He's a level one thrower. I mean, everything's going to be a rocket, and there are times when you need to put touch on the throw. That Pete, the coaches call it level one, level two, level three balls. The three being, Russell Wilson's moon ball, as they were talking about on Sunday Night Football, and those are difficult, more difficult for the defenders down the field to defend because they're not used to coming at it as high as an angle as he is. But if you looked at his very first throw, or maybe a throw later on a bootleg, and I think it was his first throw, he goes out, defensive end's there, he throws a level 3 ball 15 yards. That's very difficult to do, but it hits the receiver right in the hands, turns, gets him 10 yards after the catch. Justin Fields has not shown that ability to do that yet in the NFL. And that's what's hurting him as much as anything. The other thing is Justin Fields still, even now, he's leading the NFL in time to throw at 3.04 seconds. And he did the same thing at Chicago. And what that tells me is either he's not getting the coaching that he meshes with that makes him understand pre-snap and when to get the ball out and where the probabilities are going to be before the ball is thrown, or it also shows me that maybe he likes to play out of structure a little bit too. Well, the problem with that is if you don't have a level 1, 2, and 3 ball and you're playing out of structure, because when you do get more guys open sometimes when you scramble around, but the levels change. There's going to be guys running behind linebackers and in front of safeties, and you've got to change the trajectory on that football. And Justin Fields has just not shown that ability to. And that's besides the experience of knowing when to take a sack, knowing when to take off and run the ball, and all those things. Justin Fields is tremendous physical talent. Don't get me wrong. But Russell Wilson, even last year in an anemic Denver offense that I really thought Sean Payton did a poor job with Russell Wilson on, he was 28-6, 28 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. And I think he made them as good as they were at that time. But to come into a place like Pittsburgh, where a guy like Mike Tomlin knows what it takes to win, has showed that. I mean, look at his how many times he's had losing records, which I think is 0. He's shown that probably more than anybody in the NFL, he deserves the rope for people not to gripe and complain about him changing quarterbacks, because he knows and he is there in the building like people talk about. But I'll tell you this, in practice, there's no doubt he's seen that Russell Wilson can make every throw. People think all the throws being hashed to the opposite sideline or that kind of thing. All the throws to me mean the different level throws, because that changes the way you can play the game, and it changes the percentage chances you have of making a completion when somebody's directly between the quarterback and the receiver.
Yeah, I'm a firm belief that Russell Wilson has the higher ceiling as a passer of the football, which is what ultimately you need at that position. You can adapt your offense to a more physical running type quarterback who throws the ball a little bit like what we've seen from Justin Fields. And Arthur Smith is probably a good enough coach offensively to do that with him. But you can get that higher ceiling as to passing the football when you have a guy like Russell Wilson. Big Fire Horticulture asks, does Russell fit better into what Arthur Smith had his success with, similar with the Tennessee Titans and Ryan Tannehill? Any thoughts on that question?
I honestly think Russell could fit better in any system. And if you look at than Justin Fields right now. But yeah, I do think he fits really well into a play action system. I mean, I think all quarterbacks do. We know that's the best EPA play in football. I think all quarterbacks do. But I think he's better with the ball. And I think that on play action, sometimes what you need to do, because you don't know, because of the way that the line blocks, you have to slide a little bit right and a little bit left. Well, a lot of quarterbacks, when they slide in the pocket, they're just tempted to take off when they have to move 1 yard right or 1 yard left. And he's not tempted to do that. So I think that's why he does fit better into that type of offense too.
Very good point. Now we're going to go to the Steelers' rival in the AFC North, and we'll talk about the Baltimore Ravens. And why you think Lamar Jackson and the Ravens should be favorites to win the Super Bowl. Now, in order to do that, they maybe have to go ahead and beat Steve Spagnuolo. They have to overcome that defense of the Kansas City Chiefs. But what do you love about this Ravens team? This is an easier topic to talk about now after their massive victory last night. Probably a little bit more of a popular opinion that could be had. But I was talking about heading into the game actually on last week's show on Tuesday, about how Lamar Jackson has made such massive strides with Todd Monken's help. Todd Monken has given him some of the answers to do this, but where Greg Roman was not, about beating the blitz and attacking the blitz, and I call it attacking the attacker, when that other team is aggressively trying to attack your offense and trying to limit what you're doing by blitzing you and sending extra guys there. How do you pay them back and attack them to try to minimize what they're able to do against you? What do you think about Lamar Jackson and this Baltimore Ravens team and what makes them so dangerous in terms of their ability to get over that hump and finally win a Super Bowl this year?
Well, I think you hit the nail right on the head. I was against what you liked Lamar a long time before I liked Lamar. Early on, he was not an accurate football thrower. Yeah, and I thought that hurt him some, and I didn't know if he would get there. But now I absolutely love Lamar Jackson. But I think what makes him so good is you hit the nail on the head. Greg Roman, I think, was trying to survive the blitz, and I think Monken attacks the blitz. And I think they now have the thought that, hey, bring the blitz if you want to. We've got answers for that. And they've shown that, whether it's short slants to Zay Flowers, and they're doing a good job of stacking receivers and screwing up banjo coverages where they're switching after, where defenses switch after the ball is snapped. Also, Roman didn't do a great job of screening. And I might be understating that a little bit. But the screens that they have, even some to Derrick Henry, but when they bring in the other running back and do a great job with him screening the football, and you got to see a little bit of it last night, throwing it to him out of the backfield and having different plays where they do it, not just running straight out routes or bubbles out to the side, but you saw where Derrick Henry was down the field last night when he caught his touchdown pass. And adding an element that the defense has to account for, which they don't necessarily do, especially when they blitz. When you blitz and you call a blitz, defenses are aggressive. Guys sometimes are supposed to blitz but peel away if the running back doesn't stay in to block. And right now they're sending those guys out some instead of keeping them in to block and counting on those 5 to block them. And then you look, and another reason I love Baltimore is I think Ronnie Staley is the best left tackle in the league right now. He has not given up a sack this year. And when you don't have to worry about him, when you can line up somebody on that side, they could, Kansas City can line up Chris Jones on that side, and they're not going to have to chip. They're not going to have to slide their line to help protect them. That enables you to be able to do a lot of different things and not all of a sudden close down your offense some because you're worried about one guy on the, assaulting your quarterback from the blind side. And I think, and he's equally does a great job at the running game. But then you look at their fullback and being able to bring him in and add that as an element the defense has to get ready for. And then obviously Derrick Henry's having, a Derrick Henry year that people thought maybe is he a little bit washed up? Does Tennessee know something they're getting, letting him go? Is it just a cap thing? And I think he's shown that he's as good as ever and maybe playing with a little bit of chip on his shoulder. But as Baltimore gets Flowers involved, and then we saw Rashad Bateman last night, they're not afraid to use him and throw the ball down the field. They're doing everything you have to do to be able to win football games. And we haven't even talked about that defense. And they've got a unique side of them in the way they play one high and are able to do that more than anybody else when they want to and not worry about it. And I think that adds some element too. So I think this really is the year that Baltimore should be favored, in my opinion, to win the Super Bowl. And I get why they're not, but I think they should be the favorite.
Okay. I don't disagree with you. One of the things that I found fascinating last night, and guys, let me know, you said that some of the guys were saying that the mic is cracking. So let me know if the producer has fixed that or if we still got an issue here in the comments there over on YouTube. You guys can comment on YouTube. So let me know if we've got some issues with the mic and we can make an adjustment there. Assuming the mic is okay. We saw them hold off on running Derrick Henry yesterday until the second half. He was on the sideline so much, the coaching staff was holding him out a little bit, it seemed, for that second half when he could really get going downhill. and have a lot more success. David saying much better. Audio fix now. Great. Okay, thanks, Marcus. That was an interesting strategy, and certainly caught the announcers off guard. And a lot of people are like, what's going on with Derrick Henry? I love it when coaches bring things like that into the mix, when they're doing something that's a little bit non-conventional that the other team might not think, or letting Lamar Jackson throw the football a lot. One of the props that I had in last night's game was them to throw the ball a lot more to Justice Hill. I took Justice Hill's reception yardage over as well as an alt over because I thought that they would be getting the ball to the running backs a little bit more in the pass game, in the screen game, and they certainly did that, and he cleared it. I should have altered it even further. I went 25 plus was my ceiling there. Just the coaching staff is doing a great job as well with Todd Monken and that difference from Greg Roman. You mentioned Roman struggling in that screen game.
Yeah, I was intrigued by the fact that they weren't playing Henry too, and it's hard to think about how hard that is on the sidelines. If it doesn't work, and they got down early, and if it doesn't work, you're an idiot. The crowd thinks you're an idiot, the public thinks you're an idiot, the media is going to think you're an idiot for not playing Derrick Henry. But I think they saw something when they had Justice Hill in, and they saw that Tampa was not ready for that. I think they saw that Tampa had geared up and said, we have got to find a way to stop Derrick Henry. That'll eliminate the play action, and that'll make them worse. And they had an answer for that. And not only did they have the answer, they didn't have the answer for one drive. They came back and kept doing it again and again. And I thought that was awesome by the coaching staff. That's hard. People will never understand how difficult it is to do that and be non-traditional or what you have been in the last 3 games when you've been extremely successful by keeping him out of the game. And it paid off for them. And now what that does going forward is now other teams have to get ready for that as well. And it is tough. It is difficult when a guy like Derrick Henry's there and you say, we have got, because you put your eggs in that basket on how are we going to stop him? And then they do something totally different. And then you get used to that and they come back in with that. It's a mindset that teams have a tough time with, but it's also a physicality change during a game that can't be measured, aside from they were showing actual results on the field.
Now, while you're still here, I want to get a thought from you on the Bill Belichick, Jerod Mayo, since you have a lot of experience working with Coach Belichick. First, I want my producer to play the Jerod Mayo comments from after the game, talking about his team being soft. And keep in mind, prior to this game, they lost in a blowout fashion against the Houston Texans at home before they went over to London. And he had some quite critical comments about his team's performance, his players' performance there, but he didn't get to the point of calling them soft. Obviously, after London, he did. Matt, why don't you roll that first clip? And then go ahead and go right into Coach Belichick's reaction on the Pat McAfee show yesterday.
Good evening, or whatever time it is. Look, disappointing game. We came out, we started fast. What I would say is, look, we're a soft football team across the board. We talk about what makes a tough football team. That's being able to run the ball, that's being able to stop the run, and that's being able to cover kicks, and we did none of those today. They controlled the ball for most of the day. Their run game averaged over 4.5 yards a carry. Our run game, not sure what the average was, but it wasn't good. Look, back to the drawing board. I mean, we can't sit here and pout. We just got to put a game together.
Drake Maye's the guy.
Yep.
Drake Maye seemingly the guy. Anytime a coach comes out, and obviously you're very close to the New England Patriots, and I think the way that Indiana university fans view Indiana basketball is because of what Bob Knight did back in the 70s. I think New England Patriots fans, for the rest of their existence, will compare Patriots to how you operated with the New England Patriots. So to see a kick go back, and then for Coach Mayo to come out and say, we're a soft football team, that's almost like the worst thing you can say about a team, I think, if you're describing the football. What are your thoughts on that up there? Should Connor continue to have optimism because Drake Maye is showing promise for the future? Or what are your thoughts on the Patriots right now?
Yeah, well, I think Drake May's done some good things. In the end, we'll see how it goes when situations get a little more competitive and all that. But, defensively, the Patriots led the league last year in rushing defense, yards per carry, number 1 in the league. And this year they're way down in the 20s somewhere. It's the same guys. They re-signed Jennings, they re-signed Tavai, they re-signed obviously Duggar, right? Marcus Jones and Gonzalez have been healthy all year, which they were both on IR at this point last year. So you got Wise, you got Godshaw, you got
Keon White, you got Mapu, you got Gonzalez, 3 rookies from last year. So it's a lot of the same players, and in some cases, I would say more. So I don't, I'm kind of hurt for those guys because to call them soft, they're not soft. They were the best team in the league last year against the run. And those guys went out there and did it, even though we couldn't score many points offensively. So I don't know. I feel bad for the defensive players on that one because those guys, that's a tough group. I mean, John Jones, Godshaw, Wise, Jennings, those are all Uche. Those guys are all tough players. Like they'll strap it up and go. Duggar, I mean, they're tough guys.
So, Coach, how do you feel about? I don't know if you've ever been in that opportunity, been in that position to do, but what's your take? Belichick obviously did not like that coaching strategy. I think you have to be very careful about what you say publicly about your team because it not only reflects and resonates throughout the media, but all of the players see that as well. And then they start to develop opinions and performance based upon that. So it takes a lot of, I haven't been a coach, that's why I want to ask you, but I believe it probably takes a lot of experience with players to understand what would motivate them, what might potentially hurt, and then how to say it appropriately. And that's why it's a little bold for a first-time head coach to so early in the season say something like that so direct without him personally knowing these guys and how to motivate them properly. What's your take on that situation?
I think you're going down the right path. Some coaches use the media. They're doing that less and less because there's more media and they're taking things out of context a little bit more than they used to 20 years ago. Belichick never used the media. He wanted to say what he meant and meant what he said to his team. And he did it in a confined area, didn't want it out. And we saw what happened if somebody did get it out. I mean, they probably weren't there much longer. And this is a complete 180 for this team. And with Mayo being under Belichick and playing for him, coaching for him, this really surprised me that he said that. And most teams are not going to respond well, especially these days, to being called soft. This is a different type of mentality. I think if you're back in the Pittsburgh Steelers steel curtain days and you called them soft, I feel sorry for the next team they play. I think if you say that these days, I feel kind of sorry for the coaching staff because it's a different mentality. The guys now are from a younger age. They're from a different culture that were taught that they weren't taught to be as tough as they are. But when you call them soft, they're going to respond at you because, like Bill said, last year, it's the same guys. I mean, take out Matthew Judon, who wasn't known as a run stopper. It's the same guys, and they were number one against the run. They gave up 170-something yards rushing the other day, and there was no rush longer than 13 yards. That's a lot of slow, methodical down the line. That tells me that it's scheme. And when you're giving up, that does not tell me it's soft. That tells me it's scheme. And if it's scheme, then you got to take a look at your coaches. And again, Mayo's not going to call out his coaching staff and say, we had a bad scheme. I don't think he's doing that. But I was really surprised. It's his team, and Mayo gets to do what he wants. And for his sake, I hope it doesn't turn on him because if it turns on him, it's going to be really tough. It's already a tough year. They've won their first game, lost their last 6 in a row. But if they turn on him because of this, it's going to be really, really tough. I would love to have been in that locker room the next meeting that meeting room, the next meeting they had after that.
Yeah, it should be interesting. We've got Big Fire Horticulture saying he's not a fan of rookie head coaches throwing players under the bus. Uncle Ted says if words hurt them, then they are soft. Both opinions could be very valid. The thing about Jerod Mayo to me is, Coach, that he's taking over for one of the best, defensive minds in the NFL. But there's a clear difference. He has the same players, but to your point, the scheme and the strategy and the game plan is going to be very different when he's trying to install it. It's one thing to be a coach. It's another thing to devise all these game plans and sit in the lab at night and come up with all of these ideas. Belichick is obviously probably far better than Mayo is with understanding how to devise a game plan to attack and limit your opponent's offensive success. But beyond that, it's the ability to make those in-game adjustments, which is one of the things that Bill Belichick does better than anybody, to make those tweaks after the first series or the second series to shut down opposing teams. And I don't know that Jerod Mayo has that in his arsenal right now to call out those, I don't want to call them like your relief pitchers, but make those decisions that weren't necessarily part of the game plan. You might have thought that you could include this, and then you turn to it and it really shuts down that other team. They haven't been doing that. And so, to your point, if you're calling your players soft, but then your coaching staff isn't putting them in the best positions for success and coming up with game plans to minimize the opponent's offense and then making the appropriate adjustments in game, that's not reflecting well on you. And so it's going to be a challenge. I know we're keeping you a lot longer, Coach, than most of the guests, but this is a lot of fun. I think everybody in the comments are enjoying what you're bringing to the table here. If we have a couple more minutes, I do want to talk a little bit about some of your midseason awards here. We're not quite midseason, but I know you've got some takes on some different players and teams. So why don't you run through some of the team awards for the season as we enter week 8?
Well, these are really easy, and I appreciate it. I think it's more the 43% of the year, 43% of the way through the year awards. But Baltimore, we know I love them, you love them. But what I think is unique, I'm giving them the try again award. And what I mean is, I think Harbaugh came in and he wanted to build a championship team on defense and running the ball. And he tried doing it a completely different way with Greg Roman as the offensive coordinator. And instead of when they couldn't get where they wanted, especially when they lost that first round playoff game a couple years ago, when they couldn't get where they wanted to, he didn't throw away his whole philosophy. He just attacked his philosophy in a different way. Brought in a new guy, brought in Derrick Henry, and that's where the try again comes from. I love it when a coach really believes in himself, has some reason not to completely change, but sticks with it, but also attacks it in a different way. So he didn't just keep doing the same old dumb thing that wasn't working. He literally went with a new way to do it and kept his old philosophy. So I love that about them. Minnesota gets my Dare to Be Different award in 2 ways. Number one, if you looked at Sam Darnold and what he's been able to do, or lack of what he's been able to do over the years with different teams, when they picked him up and then they drafted J.J. McCarthy, I was looking and I was not a fan of what they were going to be able to do on offense. And I think Kevin O'Connell is one of the best offensive minds. I love what they do. But, to be able to take one of those 2 quarterbacks, and McCarthy gets hurt and there with Darnold, and I'm like, this team's going to suck. I would have bet their team total under wins quickly had I had time to figure it out and how I wanted to bet it and how much I wanted to bet. But what I give them is Dare to Be Different. Not only they bring in those 2 quarterbacks, most coaches, when they bring in new quarterbacks and they lost Kirk Cousins and you've got guys that are new to your system, they tend to play it closer to the vest. They're obviously not doing that on offense, but they're not doing it on defense either. If you look at Brian Flores and what he's doing with his defense and being aggressive and showing that 6-man front and blitzing some and dropping guys off, that is aggressive football. And not only did Minnesota dare to be different with the quarterbacks they brought in and saying, hey, we like our team, we're going to go with this, and didn't spend $1 gazillion on somebody. Then they went back and they kept playing aggressive football with those 2 quarterbacks, throwing the ball down the field and playing aggressive on defense. And I love that because people don't understand that is so far and few between on how they're attacking this year. And so hats off to those guys. Third one is Atlanta. What I love is, we talked about this with Anthony Richardson. They go out and they draft a rookie quarterback and everybody wants to see them put him in and play. And instead, what they did was they got Kirk Cousins and they're playing him and letting him I'm sure they want to win, don't get me wrong, but they're letting the young man see a professional quarterback, the way he handles himself on and off the field, the way he attacks each week, and do that. So that's the old new award. They're old school in the old quarterback. They still got the new guy in there, but they're going back old school the way they're doing it. Back 20 years ago, nobody drafted a rookie quarterback and threw him in if they didn't think he was ready. And that was rarely done. So I love what they're doing right now. I think they're thinking big picture, the franchise. I think they think they're probably not going to win a Super Bowl this year. I don't think they thought that at the beginning of the year. So I think they truly are planning for big picture right there. And then, the final one on this is the Lions. They are still the best at using their best. And what I mean by that is we all know they got Sam Laporta at tight end, and they got Jameson Williams, and they got St. Brown, and they got Jahmyr Gibbs, and they got David Montgomery, and they all use those guys at their best. They don't ask Jahmyr Gibbs to do something that he can't do. They don't ask Jameson Williams to do what they're asking St. Brown to do because he's not that guy. He's not the same guy. I love that they don't just interchange running backs and do the same stuff, interchange receivers and do the same stuff. And some people don't, some people don't do a really good job of that. They think receivers. We ask you to go across the middle, go across the middle. We ask you to go deep, find a way to beat your guy, catch a contested ball. And guys just aren't made for that. If I had Pickens, he's a contested ball guy. If I've got Jameson Williams, I'm designing double move stuff or run it or over and under routes where he's got a chance to use that straight on speed and just outrun guys. I'm scheming things up for him. The Lions do the best job of doing that of anybody I've seen on offense. And I'll be honest with you, on defense as well. And I'm just hoping their loss on defense doesn't keep them from making that run that I hope they can. I was kind of hoping they would call the Raiders when Devontae Adams had left and pick up Max Crosby because he was talking about wanting out of there. But tell me that wouldn't be a big thing to add on to Aiden Hutchinson. But the Lions get the award for using their guys better. And it's easy to say that because they're so good on offense. But they use their guys better for specifically what they're great at, better than anybody in the NFL, I think.
Yeah, I thought it gave them a massive edge, Coach, this offseason by being able to keep Ben Johnson there as the offensive coordinator, build on that continuity. I'm interested to hear a quick follow-up question. What do you think they're going to do in that 2-game absence without Jameson Williams, who was suspended for PEDs, I believe? He's going to miss this week's game against the Tennessee Titans. They're obviously still massive favorites there. Current market shows them as 11-point favorites against the Tennessee Titans, with the total sitting around 45.5, 46 points. But the week after that, they do go up against the Green Bay Packers in a big game there versus Green Bay. How do you think that they're going to – they didn't really actually use Jameson from a target perspective last week, which surprised me a little bit, but they ran him in a lot of motions and used him to clear out a lot of things underneath for Amon-Ra St. Brown. It was obviously perfect way to utilize Jameson Williams and talk about guys buying into, hey, my role this game is going to be to help get other guys free and to use us to get leverage on some of the defensive tactics that we think that they're going to deploy. We're not going to target me a lot this game, but it's going to free up things with Amon-Ra St. Brown. But now they're without Williams for a couple of weeks. Maybe not this game against the Titans, but next week against the Packers. How do you think that impacts them?
Well, I think, number one, I think Dan Campbell's the best in the NFL at getting guys to buy into their role. And when you look at that, it would be easy for either Montgomery or Gibbs to either say, hey, I want the ball more. They're not going to do that under Dan Campbell. It'd be the same thing if as a slow start for St. Brown to come out and say that too. They don't do that. I think he inspires them to want to be a part of a team and know their role and do the role, maybe better than anybody in the league. If you look at Jameson Williams, you hit the nail on the head again, and like you always do. They'll use him to clear, and they'll throw underneath. And then when they see a safety that wants to be a little more aggressive, then they'll use him to run past that safety by running St. Brown a little deeper and running Williamson a little behind and let him go over the top. And they do that. Ben Johnson's obviously fantastic at that. I think it hurts them a little bit more without having him. And I think especially this week against the Titans, I know the line's like 11, and I know that looks like an easy win. And the Titans offense is so bad, it may not matter. But when you can't back those safeties up and give some of their receivers like St. Brown a bigger area to work underneath, it makes it a little more difficult for the quarterback. If you look at what Jared Goff has been able to do completion percentage wise over the last couple of weeks, and everybody knows about his 18 out of 18 game a couple of weeks ago, he was pretty darn good last game. But when they throw those 15 and 20-yard throws underneath, they're clearing with Williams, and it makes it so much easier because they're play action. They got linebackers coming up. There are big, huge 15, 20-yard windows for him to do that. And I can't say enough about how much Jameson Williams does help in that area. Now, I give Ben Johnson a lot of credit. If anybody can scheme without Williams and still be effective, I think it's going to be him. But I think I'm not going to play the Titans plus the 11, but it would not surprise me if they were able to just keep it a little bit closer because of that loss of Williams and what that does to the defenses.
Yeah, I don't disagree. That he's a massive impact there. Ian Burgess, we're going to get one more topic to you, Coach, about the midseason awards for GMs. But Ian asked, do you have a podcast? Do you have anywhere that the listeners can check you out on?
I don't have a podcast right now. I'm in the middle of football season, and I did one a couple years ago. I would love to do one, but I'm just not doing one right now. But I appreciate the ask.
All right, there we go. Well, we'll have to bring you back on here in a few weeks to get your take on in a few weeks, because it sounds like a lot of people are loving the content that you're sharing with our listeners. Last one to get you out the door on, Coach. Talk to me a little bit about some midseason grades on some team GMs.
Man, I think most of these are obvious, but maybe a couple of them are. Let's go to Buffalo. I think letting Diggs go was a great move for them. I think they knew something in the locker. I mean, we've heard things about the locker room and things like that. I think that was a chance for them to let him go. I think he's probably going to start the downward end of his career a little bit. It was a chance for them to bring in somebody, especially when they had, they got a couple other receivers step up, and they had Kincaid that's stepped up as a tight end last year for them, along with Dawson Knox, and he's showing the ability to take some of the pressure off. I think letting Diggs go was a big move. Oddly enough, I think Houston picking up Diggs was a good move for them. So how can you say a guy in the locker room that was a positive for letting him go was a good thing for one team, but picking him up was a good thing for the other? I think that's because, it's okay, especially in the NFL. How many times have we seen guys, of course, go and remake their attitudes and remake themselves when they got picked up by a good team while they're still peaking, while they're still at their peak before they start their decline. And I think Houston probably gave him a chance to remake himself. I think that's a team that is together enough and so focused on what they were able to do last year, what they want to do this year, that he's got to fit in, or he would have been excommunicated quickly. So I think that was a good pickup for them. Obviously, the Derrick Henry pickup and allowing Baltimore to do what Harbaugh wants to do, and that's run the football and play defense, and then letting Lamar play action off of that. When you've got Derrick Henry and you can play action off that, there may be nobody better to play action off of than him. And then Indianapolis, it's funny that we talked about on here, picking Flacco up. Where would they have been if they didn't pick up Flacco? And he's got him a couple wins, kept him competitive, kept the fan base in there, and picking him up was a genius move. Pittsburgh probably got the steal of the year, picking up Fields and Russell for about $1 million each on the cap. And look what that's done for them. And if Russell Wilson doesn't stay healthy, they've shown that they can manage the game with Justin Fields. If Wilson does, I think they may be. I think they may be one of the favorites to come out and have a chance to run to that AFC Championship game along with Baltimore. Seattle. Kudos to them for staying the course. They think they've got a course, and they think they've got a path with Kenneth Walker and DK Metcalf and Lockett and Geno Smith, and they stayed there. And they're trying to work on their defense some. They worked on their offensive line a little bit, and kudos to them for not just abandoning ship and trying to make 1,000 moves when they've got a solid team and they like what they're doing. They've got some improvements I would have liked to have seen them make, but not making drastic measures, to me, was a good move for them for where they are right now. Obviously, Minnesota and picking up Matt Darnold, I think, was a great thing. But the biggest winner is the Washington Commanders. And with what they're doing with Jayden Daniels and not being afraid, Kingsbury's not an afraid kind of guy. He's definitely not a risk-averse guy. But to just throw the keys to him to the offense and open up the offense completely, to completely open it up to a rookie, that's tough to do. It's tough to make yourself do, because if you do it and it doesn't work and the numbers are bad, you might not have a job next year. And what they were able to not only do, but just to give them the keys on offense and say, hey, go do it. Be aggressive. Don't play it close to the vest. And you're talking about a defensive-minded head coach that is involved in that too. So kudos to them and their GM for the midseason awards for saying, hey, guys, don't worry about it. Job security is here. Go try to make us great and see what happens. And I still would love to know if they would have picked Jayden Daniels first in place of Caleb Williams. And then the ultimate losers are the Dallas Cowboys. If you look at where they are in EPA on offense and on defense, and just the moves they made or didn't make. I mean, sitting there and waiting on the market to set while you got to wait and pay CeeDee Lamb was insane. Doing the same for Dak Prescott was insane. And I've put some things out on Twitter about Derrick Henry wanted them to call him. Shannon Sharp said Derrick Henry was waiting on the Cowboys to give him a call. He tried to initiate some contact. It didn't happen. And people, well, they didn't have the cap money. They didn't have the cap money because they allowed the market to be set for them, which was not going to be a good thing. I don't know how anybody knew that. And now you've got Jerry Jones on his own radio show lashing out against announcers, which shows you where they are, because he is really good with the media usually. And now that he's there, he's probably scared they're not going to be relevant at the end of the year for the first time in a while. They haven't made a run for sure, but they've always at least been relevant. And I look at what they've done with their offensive line, what they haven't done the last couple of years without picking up Henry, letting Pollard go. Pollard was one of 3 running backs in the last 5 years to average 5 yards a carry. With a minimum number of rushes, only 3, and he was there and was able to make yards when necessarily there wasn't a hole. And for them to let him go and then not go out and get somebody, it's hurting Dak, it's hurting the offense. And then on top of it all, their affinity to run the ball on 1st and 10 all the time at such a high rate, especially when they get down 2 scores, is absolutely insane.
This has been outstanding, Coach. I want to make sure, since you don't have a podcast, everybody who's listening can follow you on X at Coach Kelley. It's Kelley, #1, at Coach Kelley 1. Make sure you guys do that. Coach, we'd love to have you back on at some point later this season. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for imparting all the wisdom that you have with the NFL to our listeners, and go have a great day.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. Honored, Warren. You are the best. I say it all the time. You're the best in the business. Love watching your show. I'll watch it every single week.
Thank you so much, Coach. All right, that was Coach Kevin Kelley. Really generous with his time there. He had a lot of topics that he wanted to go to, and with most of the guests, I only go through a couple of the topics, but he offered to stay on a little bit longer, and you guys benefit that. So, Nico, the man is football smart. Yes, he is. Great show as always. I appreciate that, guys. Thank you very much. Okay, we've got one more topic, and then we're going to get into some of our strength of schedule chat. And I do think that earlier, one of the issues with the microphone is that this microphone was not turned on or turned off at some point during the show. So maybe the audio is even better right now. Matt, let's go to the first video here with the Jordan rules for Patrick Mahomes.
You got the Jordan rules, and I'm calling now from now on, as long as I'm here, the Patrick Mahomes rules. So you remember when Jordan was going through it with the Pistons, all those guys in the 80s before he came Michael Jordan and Air Jordan, the Pistons used to whoop his. Anytime he came to the hole, elbows, filling them, love taps. We touched them. We in the head, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. I'm touching you.
I'm touching you spiritually. So let's see what the Raiders do this week. This is a big game. I mean, normally these games from the Raiders tend to go the way of the Kansas City Chiefs. And I'd like to, Matt, if you could pull up the tweet that I posted this offseason. The recent history with the Chiefs versus the Raiders. The Chiefs put up 35 points in a win, crickets from the Raiders. Chiefs put up 41 in a win, crickets from the Raiders. Chiefs put up 49 in a win, crickets from the Raiders. Chiefs put up 30 in a win, crickets from the Raiders. Chiefs put up 31 and 31, win by double digits, crickets from the Raiders. Chiefs lose one time, 14-20, when the Raiders defense scores 2 return touchdowns, and suddenly they say that they've got the recipe to beat the Kansas City Chiefs, and it's because they're going to implement these Mahomes rules based upon the Jordan rules. Trust me, Patrick Mahomes has had this game circled. Any game, this team is looking to three-peat. And there's a lot that's going to go into them three-peating. But the first thing is for them to have a good record so they can get that first-round bye, get that rest at the end of the season. And as a result, this game is going to be of vital importance there. So certainly interested to see how that game holds up. Now, the Raiders are with Minshew. They don't have Aiden O'Connell. And the Chiefs are very injured. The Chiefs are massively injured right now. Juju is probably going to be out. They don't really have any receivers. They're going to have to try to, like, this is on Andy Reid to come up with a masterful game plan to have success against the Raiders team. It's not going to be easy. The Raiders fight, and the Raiders are going to probably go out there and try to play for their coach and his comments in this game, and they're going to try to implement what they said previously. And so they're not going to give up an inch to Kansas City, and they're not going to care that Kansas City is walking into this game at a way different state than Kansas City was offensively when they played in week 1. And so this line has taken some Las Vegas Raiders money. Where are we at here? Point spread on this one opened at 10.5, and it's down to 10 at most spots. But it's still, you can still catch 10 if you want the Raiders, but certainly we're going to see a very motivated team on both sides here based upon some of the comments that have been said in the offseason. All right, let's get into some strength of schedule talk. We only got 2 graphics this week because I want to fly through these a little bit. Matt, why don't you bring those up? Okay, first one, we're talking about past defensive efficiency of opponents versus future defensive efficiency of opponents. And you can see here I've circled some of the teams that share the biggest differences in terms of ease of schedule there on the left with the green, or difficulty of schedule there in the right with the red. So let's start with the green. We talk about the New York Jets. We talked a lot about at the top about Aaron Rodgers, about what Aaron Rodgers needs to do. They're going up now against this New England Patriots defense they carved up in the first meeting, and that was without Devontae Adams, and that was with a different offensive coordinator. So we'll see if Aaron Rodgers can get back on track here. He theoretically should be able to. They have played. See, this is unlike the Cleveland Browns. We talked about Deshaun Watson struggling. Deshaun Watson and that Cleveland Browns offense was struggling against the number 1 easiest schedule of opposing defenses year to date. They're there on the right, playing the easiest schedule. The New York Jets are in a completely different category. The New York Jets have played the most difficult schedule of opposing defenses. And so that's played into part of the reason why they have been struggling. Now they go up against a much easier opponent. Should be interesting to see how that goes. You look at the Tennessee Titans. They're going up against an easier defense in the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions balled out last week against the Minnesota Vikings, but so it's not going to be easy for the who knows who's going to be their quarterback there, but Mason Rudolph most likely. But that offense of the Tennessee Titans has played a very difficult schedule. Also the Jacksonville Jaguars. A couple of other teams that stand out here, the Minnesota Vikings offense, they went up against the 5th most difficult schedule of opposing defenses year to date. And now they have a much different situation here going up against this Los Angeles Rams defense that allowed the Las Vegas Raiders, a very limited Las Vegas Raiders, basically are relying only on their tight end for their offense to keep that game relatively tight. You got the Miami Dolphins. We'll see Tua in his first game back. I can't wait to watch that, going up against the Arizona Cardinals team that fought really hard. Don't get me wrong. They fought very hard last week. But you remember that Chargers offense? I mean, the Chargers offense is just so limited. Yes, they have their offensive lineman back, but it's all slow tight ends running down the field catching passes because they were without some of their speedier wide receivers, and they just throw so much to their tight ends. They really are not a very dynamic offense, very much the opposite of what we're going to get here for the Miami Dolphins, who have speed all over the field. So that's going to be a real big difference. The Cardinals last night played a very slow offense. Now you're going up against a very quick and fast twitch offense of the Miami Dolphins. Off to the right, you've got teams that are going to be facing more difficult defenses than they've been playing year to date on average. First one up is the Washington Commanders. Unfortunately, it looks like it might be without Jayden Daniels, but that line, the total sitting at 43.5, 44 points. The Chicago Bears are actually favored on the road in DC, laying 2.5 points. I was so looking forward to this game. Unfortunately, Jayden Daniels goes down, gets hurt the very first play of the game against the Carolina Panthers. Stays in the game for a couple more plays, obviously goes out, and it's looking like we're going to be left with Marcus Mariota and Cliff Kingsbury, which got the job done last week. That's against a putrid defense of the Carolina Panthers. Much different story here. They're going to have to really rely on the run game. That's the vulnerability of the Chicago Bears defense, and they might be able to have a little bit of success, but it's not going to be easy when Marcus Mariota is your quarterback, and the opposing defense, most importantly, has a full week to prepare for Marcus Mariota being your opposing quarterback. Very different than what Carolina was dealing with in the last game. The New Orleans Saints, they are going up against a much more difficult defense this week than what they've been playing year to date, which has been the fourth easiest schedule of opposing defenses. And if you look at them, they're going up against the Los Angeles Chargers. And the Chargers, obviously, we know that the Chargers defense has looked better because they've played some weaker offenses. Now they get fortunate to play another weak offense this week because it looks like Derek Carr has got another week where he is not going to be in there. And so I'm not sure yet if they've made that announcement, if we're going to get which quarterback that we're going to get here for the Saints offense. But that game certainly is Chargers laying 7 right now. And then lastly, the Detroit Lions on this slide. They're going up against a more difficult defense. We talked about that with Coach Kelley, about that Titans defense and what they might be able to do, especially now that Jameson Williams isn't there to open up the field. All right, Matt, let's go to the next one. And we've got the offensive side of the football. So how are things going to be for opposing defenses? Well, talked about the Chiefs game. Talked about them relying on their defense. Talked about that with Coach Kelley. Well, this Chiefs team is going to be going up against a much easier offense this week. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, or when we were talking about it with Coach Kelley, the Chiefs have played the most difficult schedule of opposing offenses so far this year, and their defense has still played elite. Now they're going up against a far worse Las Vegas Raiders offense. How well will they perform? How much will they be able to do to limit the scoring of the Raiders to allow for their own offense to not have to do much against these Jordan rules that the Raiders are supposedly bringing to bear? That's going to be an interesting game, but it's going to be much easier for the Chiefs defense than it has been. Same thing for the Baltimore Ravens. They're going up against a Cleveland Browns team that, yes, does not have Deshaun Watson, but got rid of their best wide receiver, Nick Chubb. So happy that he's back. So nice to see a guy who is a great guy to begin with, plays the game really hard, is super talented, and then works through just a brutal rehab that takes months and months to work through and then gets back into the game. But let's be honest, he's not going to be Nick Chubb of what we saw before that injury. He's still got to work up into that. So this Browns team is going to be relying on the run game a little bit against the Baltimore Ravens, who have obviously one of the best run defenses in the NFL. Yes, you had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have a little bit of success against them last week. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, no, not Rachaad White. Rachaad White, I took his longest run under as one of the elevated plays for props, under 9.5. His longest was 8. He is not explosive. You do have Bucky Irving. I don't know why they don't get Bucky Irving more involved. Taylor a little bit more involved. They've got those other guys there. I was a little bit wrong on thinking that we would get fewer run plays from Rachaad White. I also bet his under in rushing attempts. I think he finished with 9. I thought they would get Taylor a little bit more involved because he was more explosive. Perhaps they probably should have, given the results of that game. I thought the game state was going to favor the Baltimore Ravens, less rushing opportunities for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They probably should have been passing the ball a little bit more from the start, and handing the ball off a little bit more to Bucky Irving and Sean Tucker there. I think I got his name wrong for the rookie there. Actually, second-year guy. Arizona Cardinals. It's going to get easier for the Arizona Cardinals this week against the Miami Dolphins. But that was with the Miami Dolphins playing most of the season without Tua. It's going to be fascinating to see how Tua gets reincorporated into this offense, how quickly they get back to what they were doing previously against this Arizona Cardinals defense. Then you got the Detroit Lions, which we talked about. They're going up against a bad Tennessee Titans offense, laying 11 to 11.5 points at home. It's actually 12 out west at South Point in Vegas. Some teams that are going to be facing much more difficult offenses than they've been accustomed to. Look at that Raiders team off to the right. You know, the Raiders defense. they have played the third easiest schedule of opposing offenses. We know the Chiefs are limited. We know the Chiefs aren't as high-flying as they've been in the past. But the Chiefs still have a good overall offense. They're getting so much out of it. They're squeezing every last drop of juice out of that offense. And thanks to Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes' performance. Now, Patrick Mahomes has been throwing for all the touchdowns. They aren't scoring all the points as high-flying. But from an efficiency perspective, they are there. And the Raiders have just played a very easy schedule of opposing offenses. So they've got their work cut out for them on that side of the football. We also have the Chicago Bears going up against that Washington Commanders team. But guess what? They're not going to have to go up against Jayden Daniels, so that helps a ton. You got the Cleveland Browns. They're going to be in for it. They've played about a league average schedule of opposing offenses, and now they're going up against one of the best in the NFL in terms of the Baltimore Ravens, might be the very best at this point in the season. And then the Tennessee Titans, we talked about them going up against the Detroit Lions, who once again, as you mentioned before, are without Jameson Williams, might hurt from that perspective. So if you look at those four teams circled in red there, the defense of the Raiders, the defense of the Bears, and the defense of the Titans, all three of those teams are going up against offenses that are really good, but are missing some pieces, right? No Jayden Daniels for the Bears to have to face. No Juju and other receivers for the Raiders to have to face. And no Jameson Williams for the Titans to have to face. Meanwhile, the Cleveland Browns, like the Baltimore Ravens team, has everybody, and they're playing really well. So that's going to be interesting. With that said, we are not. Okay, I will answer this question. Let's go back to me, Matt. We're done with this. I'll get to a couple of questions here. Peter mentions last week. Last week I lost on this show both of the longest props. That was a brutal for me to lose both of those. Back to the lab, we still are hitting well over 60% on this show. Last week, from a betting perspective for clients, it was a great week. It wasn't a great week on this show with the two props when you're only giving out 2 of like 30 props that I have. Did not hit on those. Even though I gave those props out to my clients at 1-unit bets, we still were up big last week. NFL was 30-18 overall, 63%. And we continue to roll here through 7 weeks, posting another winning week for subscribers. $100 better was up over 1,500 this weekend following plays overall. And through 7 weeks, we are hitting 62% in the NFL, 66% on elevated props, 60% in overall college, and $100 better is up over $10,000. You can use show 50 to get 50% off anything. You guys like this code last week. We're going to do something different for next, I don't know if it's this Friday or for Halloween. We're going to be doing something unique, which is coming up here. Hopefully you guys have your costumes picked out and are getting ready to go for that. But we'll do something different there. But you guys loved this code last week, so we'll run it back this week. If you want to take advantage of what we've been doing this season, which is like some absolutely outstanding results here, go ahead and use show 50% off anything. Peter, no, not Peter. Jerod, are we in your bathroom? No, this is not the bathroom. I had this office specially built for several reasons, but one of the reasons is I've got my standing desk, like my sit-stand desk right here. And no matter where I am back in the room behind me, I can see my odds screen at all times, no matter where I am. When I'm walking here, grabbing water from the butler pantry sink down there, whether I'm walking in from outside, whether I'm going to the restroom, no matter what I'm doing, I got TV monitors up here. I've got 7 screens down here. I can see all of this no matter where I am, but yet I've got the privacy that I want. I can shut the door here and I can be closed in. I absolutely love this. I cannot recommend enough. If anybody out there has the ability to put your office in a glass wall and then see your computer no matter where you are. Like I'm working out in the gym way over there and I can look up, I can see my odds screen because the odds screen, I can't show it to you right now, but the odds screen it does, it pops up if if a line is changed, side or total, and it stays lit up. You can absolutely see that when games are moving, even if I'm working out in my gym way over there. So I love the glass walls here. It's probably one of the best things that I did before the season started, is to build this office. Now, the trick was, what I did not expect, which I should have thought about, was the fact that there's tile on the floor, there's glass walls, I've got light here from a window, tons of echo in this room. So we had to install a lot of acoustic treatments. All over the wall, there's acoustic treatments. You can't see it here. You've got acoustic treatments hanging from the ceiling, a couple of them there, really to help dampen the echo and the sounds, and it makes it totally great in here. The sound quality is much different in this room than it is out in the rest of the basement with the tiled floors. But this is absolutely my favorite place to be, with all my screens, and now I can see the odds everywhere that I go. I'm dressing up as LT with a white mustache. Okay, Nico, go ahead and do that. That's great. Sounds like Ian says, sounds like some personal fouls are going to get called in that Chiefs game against the Raiders. Yeah, the league, I don't think, was too happy with those comments from Antonio Pierce, so I'm interested to see how they react to that. All right, guys, what are we at? We're at an hour 45. We've been rolling with this thing. But Coach Kelley was great. I think you guys loved Coach Kelley. We maybe will have to bring him back. Next week, though, we've got an NFL insider. She hasn't been on the show yet. Great content, great information. Lots of inside scoops that we're going to be able to get from her. So I'm really looking forward to that next Tuesday. In the meantime, if you were watching over on X, make sure that you go over to YouTube, subscribe to the Sharp Football Analysis channel. The show, Sharp Football Show, is up there on that channel. We go live every Tuesday and Friday at noon Eastern. Sharing our thoughts this upcoming Friday is going to be bets, prop bets, NFL, college, sides, totals, everything in between. We're going to be sharing a lot of those with you this upcoming Friday, and cannot wait for it. So thank you, guys. Big Fire Horticulture. We'll definitely get him back on. We'll definitely get Coach Kelley back on at some point. We got guests that are going to be lined up coming, and experts over at Sharp Football Analysis dropping their information and knowledge on the Friday show with their bets. And then we'll get back to you guys on Tuesday. So have a great week. Good luck with all your bets and all studying the lines and injuries and getting prepared for week 8 in the NFL. It's going to be another fun week, and we'll see you guys on Friday.